Okay, internal validity. Internal validity means a researcher can control all the variables. Well, that's pretty cool. Internal validity. The researcher can control all the variables. We can set them all up and we know what's going to happen. External validity. The researcher cannot control all the variables in the experiment. Famous experiment. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. They just made a movie about it. Crazy experiment. Psychological experiment out of Stanford. They go in and they get a bunch of college students. Now, we're going to talk about samples. We've got some fun discussions. This has kind of been a heavy-duty discussion. We've got a lot of fun things coming up about good and bad research. I love to look at bad research. It's just humorous. It's just fun. But in this particular research, they wanted to compare the mind thought of prisoners and wardens. Because what they found is that people that were a warden in a prison, that were in charge of working with the prisoners, that were warden in charge of being the authority figure over the prisoners, they found that it was a weird thing psychologically. Some of you may even have this job. And this is an interesting one because we actually are teaching this class. We're actually teaching this class in some prisons. And that's cool. And those of you guys in there, man, I'm loving having you guys, and this is perfect. But this is a great example of the psychology. So Stanford University, they come in here and they said, okay, so they went and got these college guys and gals, and they just put a note up on the board saying, hey, $100 for the weekend. Anybody wants to take time to come and do this scientific research? So here's boy, every other college student is broke, so it's like, man, I want to be one of the first 100 people because I want one of those $100 deals. And I got nothing to do this weekend anyway, so I grab this deal and I go to the thing, and I'm just a normal average person, and I'm this college kid, and I go and I turn this in, and I say, do I give them $100 now? And they go, no, you know what? You're all done at the end of the weekend. You got to stay for the weekend. Do you agree to do that? Yeah, I'll do that. Well, maybe you've even seen the movie. I haven't seen the movie. I heard it's really rough. It's rated R. Big movie came out. It's such a famous experiment. So they randomly, of all the people that came in, they randomly took the cards and they made half of the people. They made half of the people prisoners, and they made half of the people wardens. And they blocked it off, and they put small confined areas in there. Okay, they didn't have doors that shut. They put confined areas, and you had to stay in these doors, and then the wardens had to maintain the deal. Wow, sounds in it. So you're like, okay, well, cool. That sounds like fun. That's a good thing. But no, it goes totally haywire. It goes totally haywire. The warden people developed this alpha personality. And it's experiment, and the people, the professors and the college students that are doing this, it got out of control, and the warden people became this alpha personality, and so a lot of the people that were selected to be the inmates in the deal said, I want to leave. This is not even funny anymore. Forget it. I don't want the $100. I'm out of here. And they said, no, you can't leave. And they're like, no, seriously, I've had enough. I want to leave. And it got so bad, and I don't want to even quote the whole study because the movie, I don't know if the movie exaggerated it or not. But when they tried to leave, they beat those people up and crammed them back in there. And they had case after case of all these weird things. And so the weekend got all done. And we look back, and what's the problem? Here's the problem. The problem it's exactly what we're talking about. There was so much external validity that the researchers had an idea of what they thought would happen, and they thought they could control this experiment. And then when they couldn't control it, then this experiment got out of hand, and we had so much external validity that all of a sudden it was kind of weird because they actually studied these people with this experiment, and a certain percentage of those people, it changed their personality for life. The weekend. And they had a different perspective. Wow. So what's the application? Well, the application is where's the balance between ward and inmate? But the same token is where's the balance between human and human? Where's the balance between the way I look at this and the way I look at that? How do I look at people? And so that's psychology. I mean, that's what we're, in your lifetime, that's what we're gonna study. I mean, we got all these things going on in our society right now where, this particular week, this may date us in a year from now. But I just I actually live in, I have a house in Fort Worth and a house in Texaco, and I just got back from Dallas Fort Worth, and I was there when I wasn't at the spot where it happened, but they just gunned down the policeman because of they felt like that the policeman in another state didn't treat people right. So this person decided they would retaliate, and since somebody got killed, they would just kill people too. So they killed 5 police officers. Well, why? These weren't guys that had done the problem. Why does this happen? So this is psychology. We used to study monkeys, and we used to say, okay, well, what does this monkey do? No, psychology now is looking at social, looking at cultural. Why do we do what we do? We're asking some pretty serious questions, not just in the United States, but worldwide. Why is this happening? So you're like, well, that doesn't really hit home. Yeah, so it kind of did. So at my home in Fort Worth, my neighbor is he was a Navy SEAL, and now he works out of the office in Dallas Fort Worth, and his name's Lorenzo. So Lorenzo comes home, and he said, "Hey, Lorenzo, how's it going?" And he shook his head. And he goes, "Rough day." I said, "Oh." I said, "Man, what happened?" And I we were just making conversation. He goes, "Well, one of the police officers was a Navy guy, and I had to go, and they notified me. He was a policeman, and he was in the Navy Reserve, and he said he was shot, and he said because he was Navy and because he was Navy Reserve, it was his job to go tell the family that their husband or dad had been shot." So he goes, I go to the house, and I go, "Wow, Lorenzo, man, that must be awful." And he says, "Yeah." And he said, "I got to make the funeral arrangements for this guy." And he said, "I don't mind doing it." He said, but he said, "I've got to go tell the family." He said, "Do you know what?" He said, "I've been trained to tell them, I'm officer, I'm Officer so-and-so, and the Secretary of the Navy has sent me to inform you." And he goes, they're going to be like, "Why is he dead?" So I'm like, and I mean, not to be dramatic, but ladies and gentlemen, members of the jury, psychology has taken on a whole new thing. We're out of the textbook now, and this generation is going to change. This now is a requirement. It used to be psychology. You could choose a lot of things. You could choose psychology, sociology, history. There's a lot of things you could take to fill this requirement. Psychology 101 is a degree requirement for every degree that you take now. Well, why do we do that? Because we got to understand people, and we got to start solving problems. The things we're looking at here are interesting, but they are world problems. If you're going to be the educated people that are going to be in college, and you're going to be the educated people making good decisions, we got to look at what it is that's going on in psychology. What's causing these behaviors? So, once again, wow, important stuff. Chase a little bit of a rabbit there, okay? And but it's so critical that you understand that my passion for teaching psychology is more than just, are we going to get this right on the test? No, whatever you do in your career, you're going to deal with people and you're going to deal with society. Are you going to make it better or are you going to make it worse? I mean this, you've got to understand people, and you got to understand data, and you got to understand what's going on. Psychology 101 is no longer just a fun class. It's application. It's application. It's not a busy work class. I need to learn about people, and I need to learn about our situation with what's causing behavior. So once again, external validity, researcher cannot control. Placebo. A placebo is, we're doing a research. I mentioned earlier that I have my degree in science. I went to pharmacy school, so we learned a lot about something called a placebo. Now, a placebo is a fake pill. So somebody has something and they just can't figure out what's causing it, and so they might give them a placebo and say, "Oh, Mr. Smith, just can't figure out what's causing those headaches. Now, does that mean those headaches aren't real? No, the headaches are probably real, but for some reason we can't figure out what's causing them. So in his mind, and when we get in, we're going to talk about the brain and what causes things to function, but in his mind, he may need to release the idea that it's hurting. So we do this placebo. It's kind of interesting because I don't want to spoil this, but in a hospital, we call it an obicalp. See, I'm letting the cat out of the bag. So somebody's going to give you an obicalp, which is placebo spelled backwards, and you're going to be like, what? You think this is in my head? What are you talking about? But here's the thing. The placebo is a fake pill effect. So we may do research where we make people think one thing and see if it's actually happening. Okay? Another famous experiment, once again, we took a bunch of college kids. We took them in. We said, okay, we're going to pay you $100 for the evening. You come in, but we're going to study. We're going to talk to you. We're going to study you. And famous experiment. As a matter of fact, I've heard other people refer to this. They gave them alcohol to drink, and they took beer bottles and they filled them full of water, and they put some beer on the top and had the smell of that. And the people that had the water were the most intoxicated acting people. Now that's an interesting experiment. That tells you, that makes you wonder what's the real, once again, I'm not advocating good or bad on the drinking. That's a bad situation as far as responsible people. It's interesting that the ones that had no alcohol were exhibiting the most. So what was it? It was a placebo effect. They perceived what it would be like to have drinking too much, and so they had that. So once again, was it the alcohol that caused the behavior? Oh, no. So we begin to learn a lot about why people might drink or what their perception is by this placebo. Once again, just one experiment that is an example there. And the last one that we have is a double-blind experiment, in that neither the subject or the observer knows what's being tested. So I hire somebody to go and do this experiment, and I might even watch it as the researcher or get the data, but the person that's doing the experiment doesn't know what we're testing for. That way they can't be biased. That way they can't be biased. Oh, don't you kind of like this a little more? They don't even know what they're testing for. Okay. So a double-blind experiment is another scientific tool so that we're not biased with our research data. Well, ladies and gentlemen, members of the jury, we are now reached test number 1. So all the notes we've given you, everything with Phineas Gage, everything with the start of everything with the beginning of the class, all of the notes that we've given you, that will be included in test number 1. So quite a bit need to study. Now, when you take test number 1, you'll take that on the computer. You cannot use your notes. You cannot use any outside aids for the test. The test is strictly based on what you know. Once again, study and do a good job on that test, but don't use any of your notes. Don't get any help. Don't get on the computer. Anything like that would be academic dishonesty, and you need to realize that in college that's a big thing. Any college that you even signed a deal at the beginning for academic dishonesty that says that you will appear before a review board if you have a question on your academic dishonesty. So you're like, well, that's not fair. Well, why would they do that? Well, which college, based on their accreditation, and once again, Mesa-Lands is North Central accredited, a big thing, which college, based on their accreditation means how solid are these classes we've got? Well, if we're going to go out and we're going to cheat on the test, then we don't know what it is that we're learning. We didn't learn this standard. We didn't prove that we earned this information. Okay. I don't know about you, but I kind of hope that the doctor in the emergency room didn't cheat on his test. I don't know about you, but I kind of hope the guy that put my airbags into my car didn't cheat on that test. We need to know what we need to know. But once again, academic dishonesty is certainly nothing to mess with. Always be on the up and up, and never cheat. Once again, the test is based on what you study and what you take on the computer. No notes, no outside materials, and I wish you luck. And we'll see you for the next video.